And we always tell our engineers too, whatever you're building this week might not exist anymore in 2 weeks. So we really can't be married to anything because I think something that people do wrong, not just as early stage founders, but also in product management, is that we get really married to a solution.
Once again, welcome to the Digital Customer Experience podcast with me, Alex Turkovich. So glad you could join us here today and every week as we explore how digital can help enhance the customer and employee experience. My goal is to share what my guests and I have learned over the years so that you can get the insights that you need to evolve your own digital programs. If you'd like more info, need to get in touch, or sign up for the weekly companion newsletter that has additional articles and resources in it, go to digitalcustomersuccess.com. For now, let's get started. Greetings and welcome back to the Digital CX podcast. This is episode 72. I'm Alex Turkovich. So great to have you back this week and every week as we talk about all things digital in CX. I have a phenomenal guest lined up for you today in Larissa Licha, who is CEO and co-founder of Joyn, Joyn. Now, a lot of what we talk about in digital is the cross collaboration between departments. And one of the sticking points that we all encounter a lot is that collaboration point between product and engineering, or R&D, and customer-facing teams. And that is precisely what Joyn is there to do, to try to draw those a little bit closer together, keep customer-facing teams informed, and keep the information flowing. It's super cool stuff. And actually, since we recorded our episode, Joyn got a seed round from CS Angels, which we all know and love. So massive congrats to the Joyn team. And I really hope you enjoyed this conversation with Larissa, because I sure did. Larissa, I want to welcome you to the podcast. I've been looking forward to this one, and welcome to the show. It's good to have you.
I'm very excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I don't actually totally remember how we got connected, but as soon as we did and we had an initial meeting, I was like, oh, you're doing cool stuff. We need to talk. We need to have you on the show. We need to share what you're doing because it's super cool. But also you have this fascinating background. And, we're going to obviously start with the obligatory background question, but tell me about your career as a tattoo artist.
Yeah, I mean, it really started with me. Like after school, I was just hanging out in this tattoo studio, just drawing. And eventually they were like, you want to do this? And I was like, I guess. And I grew up in a pretty conservative, defined environment in Germany where your life's pretty much set on a certain path. And I was always like, that ain't me. But I also didn't really know. There wasn't really any other options, right? Where I grew up, it was like, oh, you can be a computer scientist. You can run an AI company. That was not a thing where I grew up. So for some reason, this opportunity to tattoo, and with that really do art as a job, and the ability to really do it from anywhere was very appealing. And it was also kind of showing my extended family that you can be a rebel and be successful. So that's kind of what brought me to tattooing. And then it brought me around the globe. I was in Japan, I was in all over the US, Germany. So it was definitely an interesting experience, challenging in its own ways, but interesting to do, especially as young as I was. So
it was an escape, and it was a vehicle for you to get out, basically, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then it very abruptly ended, and I had to redefine my path, and now I'm in tech. So there you go. You never know.
Would it be safe to say that you wouldn't be in tech if it weren't for tattooing?
Honestly, probably not. And there was obviously other things also in my life that kind of led me to where I am now. But I do think kind of taking that detour, and then also what happened to me that I had to kind of figure out something else, that combination, I think ultimately led me to tech, and sort of accepting the inner nerd in me that I think I was fighting all along. Since I was a teenager and a kid, I was always really rebellious in that sense. So and then I realized I really like mathy stuff, and economics and data science is kind of cool. So I definitely think it was an important step to actually get me to where I am now.
You started listening to yourself a little bit more.
Yes, exactly. Rather than listening to what people told me I was or
Hmm.
should be or will be, I was like, nah, I'm me. I can do my thing and pave my own
I've got
path.
my own path. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's cool. And then I saw, I mean, I think the most extended kind of thing that you've had in your past in terms of role. I mean, you were at Next Role for like 8 years, something like that,
Yeah.
and ascended through that organization, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's even funny, Nextral actually initially rejected me
Mhm.
for it was also like an entry level role. And I later on asked the recruiter why I was rejected, and she was like, "You were overqualified." And I was
Oh,
like, "I truly wasn't." So I don't know. I don't know why you're saying that. But I think it was like a month or so after I was like, oh, there's this other position. And it was like the first international sales development representative,
mm,
basically. I've never done sales. I was in customer support before that and in operations. And then it was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this SDR thing. But I was only in the SDR role for I think 3 or 4 months, but I hit my quota, exceeded my quota. I started getting involved with like how we're doing lead scoring and just like got really, really intense about it. And I had like a really great manager that advocated for me to move me into account management. As soon as I moved into account management, they restructured the compensation and fired all this, like all the salespeople left or were
oh
fired.
my
So
gosh.
I was suddenly AM and sales, but in a way, it was the best thing because we ended the customer, like we owned it end to end, right? It was like
Yeah.
I was the one bringing in the deal and then managing the deal. So we had really strong relationships, which led to all this revenue growth, etc. And then we had this new team, which was our competitive intelligence team, which was really all about retaining our most important customers. And
Hmm.
that then got me to really mess around with product and start working with the product team. And I was doing these janky reports and A/B tests to kind of prove the value of what we're doing for customers and started taking out competitors left and right and like
Mm,
really growing our retention, which then the company was like, how about we just move into product and just build the thing? And that's then what my started my career in is like product management. I was like a small and mighty team in AI machine learning that turned into a business unit. So I got to run the business unit where actually my now co-founder oversaw product. And then in my last role, I was the chief of staff for product design and engineering. And my job really was being the connective tissue between our engineering product teams and customer facing teams. So held many roles at Nextral and was given a lot of opportunities. And it was
yeah.
definitely an exciting journey, also seeing the company through the growth and trajectory. So yeah.
Right. That's a fascinating journey, and I one you don't hear very often. Just that kind of shift between different things. I mean, I think that's that one. It's cool that they're kind of open to looking at their talent in different ways, but I would imagine that speaks highly of you and your ability to just like, oh, she can go handle that, like she's got that, she's a problem solver, like go.
Yeah, and I will say I've never applied for any of the roles I've held at Nextral.
Hmm.
It was always somebody being like, I think you should do this. And I was like, me? What are you talking about? Like, makes no sense. Which was kind
Yeah.
of like, I had a lot of people that saw potential in me that I didn't intuitively see. And like coming from Germany too, we have a very hierarchical structure in organizations and how you
Hmm.
can move up the ladder. So to me, this was like mind blowing. But yeah, I think in the end, the way the company deployed me was this is the most broken thing. We know who to put on it. And that's where I then got like deployed to. So that's kind of been my journey. And again, it was great because it just gave me so much exposure. I worked in nearly every department, I worked with every department. So it was like the best way to prep me for what I'm doing now as like running my own company. So I'm definitely very grateful to have been there for like 8 years, which
Mm,
still seems crazy. Like when I joined, I was in my early 20s. Like,
yeah.
this is wild.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
yeah.
those experiences, it's a variety of experiences. So you got to see how different organizations work and how they work with each other and what the interplay is and all those kinds of things, which is crazy, crazy valuable.
Yeah, it definitely was. I definitely learned a lot personally, but also again about departments and also
Yeah.
the I would say evolution that you go through as a company as you grow, as the things that matter as a company evolve because of, it's very different like being an early stage startup to prepping for IPO to being an IPO
Mm,
company, right? Like it evolves so much. And with that, the way we work together has to evolve as well. And I think that's not always easy for companies to like manage that transition. It's a tough one.
yeah. I mean, one of my mentors always said, go get your MBA if you want to, but go join a startup. Like you learn just as much, and it's like practical application is like real world stuff. It's like boot camp basically.
It is. And I will say though, it's definitely not for everyone. I think we always glamorize like startups, but once you're
Yeah.
actually in it, you're like, whoa, because like the urgency and the pressure, especially of it being your own thing, is like very different. And I always had a lot of urgency and pressure and like high expectations and in any role, but like being in a startup where, I know we always are strapped on resources and all
Mm,
these things, no matter where we work. But I think in a startup, it's all
yeah.
survival. It's like, can we just like
Yeah.
make it? And that's truly like the first 5 years of a startup, but it'll definitely very rapidly teach you a lot of things. And I think help you identify, is this actually for me or is this not for me? Because yeah, it's
Hmm.
definitely challenging. I mean, I wouldn't want to do anything else, which I don't know what's wrong with me. I love though what we're doing, irrespective of like how hard it is. So yeah.
The entrepreneurial spirit. Well, talk to me a little bit about that. So now you're, co-founder and CEO of Joyn, Joyn, and been your journey into that? Like, what led you to, to start that?
Yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of things throughout my career have kind of led me to join. And I've met my co-founder Kendra at my prior company like 10 years ago this year.
Mm,
So we've been really fortunate to have worked together for a long time. And we really always share, what we think about culture, how we want to build teams. That we really love solving problems where people tell you this can't be solved, especially when they create really meaningful value for the customer. Like, and for context, Nextdoor is an ads company, right?
yeah.
So Kendra and I were there like, how do we find meaning in ads? Just the ads that follow you around the internet. That's what we were doing as a company. So we really focused on, in the machine learning business unit, it was all about black and white ways. Are ads actually doing anything for you? And it's really a
Yeah.
statistical way of measurement, which was a big risk to the business because it actually could tell our customers, no, they're not. And honestly, in
Yeah.
most cases, no, they're not. And you waste most of your budget. But
Hmm.
for us, it was like a way to create really meaningful value for the end customer in the context of advertising. And we had the stickiest contracts, largest contracts. And I think that was like really great to see. So I think that's what always connected us. But then when I was in the chief of staff role and kind of having seen the transition of the company to of, now we have all these software tools and everyone has their own ways of working and none of them effectively talk to each other. And again, also seeing like our priorities change and having all these departments with their focus areas, I was just like, work has just become really hard. Like, we're
Mm,
spending a
yeah.
lot of time on things now, like status meetings or chasing down information. And the rift between, especially customer facing teams and product teams, is pretty steep in a lot of organizations. And you have, right, the customer facing teams that obviously need to know what's happening, what is being released, is this bug being fixed on, what's product actually prioritizing. But the larger you grow, the more of a black hole it becomes. And then product engineering is frustrated because they constantly have to like report out to these other teams. But what are you going to do, right? You need to collaborate. But I think that
Yeah.
friction was so hard to manage at my previous company as a chief of staff. And as we just looked outside of like our own experience, my co-founder also, her background's in product, so she kind of lived this too. We're like, wow, this has just become a general problem. And I think it actually takes so much time away from the thing that's the most important, which is the customer and building for the customer and creating value. So that's really what led us to join and really focusing on this, like how can we streamline this collaboration between especially product engineering and customer facing teams like CS, sales, and marketing, so
Yeah.
we can actually connect the dots strategically and focus on the right things without all this overhead of reporting out or chasing people down to get information. So that's kind of the long story that led us to
Yeah.
what we're doing with Joyn now.
I mean, it's classic entrepreneurship 101. see problem, solve problem, like, but also like, everybody talks about sales to post sales handoff. Like that's like the classic, like we have a problem with this. But I love what you guys are focused in on, which is that, that R&D to customer team relationship that doesn't get addressed that often. Like it's a problem everywhere, right? And people try to solve it with like Jira integrations and things like that, but it's like there's a granularity there, and there's still a level of effort that you guys are focused on and trying to remove, which I think is super cool.
Yeah. And I think the side effect of like just having, and I've literally tried everything in my previous company
Mm-hmm.
too, like Asana, Monday, Zapier, like Notion, all of the things was like, oh my God. But in the end, what I ended up hiring was what we like to call more glue people, which was our product
Mm,
operations team, because they would act as this translation layer. Their job was
yeah,
really understanding, here's our priorities on the business side. Here's what product and engineering is doing. How can I bring these two together? But the
yeah,
problem, even with having glue people, is that a lot of these things aren't rooted in data, right? So then, yes, product operations can flag and be like, hey, we have an issue here. Every time we hand something over to marketing, they get stuck for 6 weeks because the way product writes it in their product brief doesn't meet their criteria. And then you have
right,
this back and forth. But because it wasn't rooted in data, you then have like me, the chief of staff, or whomever, go to the respective executives and flag this. But then the actual accountability to change anything, that's like the thing where usually things fall through. And then the only way to keep mitigating it is just like hiring more glue people or just sticking with the
yeah,
status quo. Right. And we
yeah,
talk to a lot of people that are these people, whether it's product marketing or head of biz ops or CS sometimes, right? Like we see this actually in a lot of organizations where CS are these glue people.
yeah,
They often, we hear, the worst part of my job is understanding product progress. Like we hear this so consistently. I was like, this is not how it should be, because like those are customer facing teams, and then product and engineering are the most expensive functions that work on some of the most important things. But if they're disjointed, the harm to the business is really, really outsized, right? It's really
and
bad.
the
So yeah.
distraction of all of that is so massive, because I mean, one of the things that I talk about quite often with digital CS is the fact that, the technology that we implement is not necessarily meant to replace a CSM. It's meant to augment them so that they can focus on what they're there to do, which is to provide value and to, drive outcomes and things like that. And I would say the same thing for product and engineering. It's like I don't want to I don't want my product managers to be constantly on the hook for updates, or or to have to build a CS ops team. I'd rather focus my resources on people who are building stuff and focused on actually implementing that stuff, rather than like closing off on tickets and doing all those kinds of things, right? So it's a cool kind of use of technology to, again, focus your resources on what's important.
Yeah. And I think the thing that was interesting for us too to sort of observe is that I think for like leadership that is further up, and I actually lived this too, because I was talking to my prior CTO and I was owning OKR planning, which I think any person that ever owned OKR planning can tell you it's the worst thing
For the
ever.
listener, tell us what you mean by that.
For OKR planning,
Uh-huh.
basically, right, goal planning, usually you do it annually or quarterly. You set
Yeah.
company level goals and align key results to it. And usually you have it on the company, and then each department has their respective goals. And our company did this annually and then quarterly.
Yep.
And my CTO was like, man, OKR planning at Nextrol, it was like so smooth. At my company now, it's a mess. And I was thinking to myself, man, like you literally don't know that I probably had 100 meetings. I probably sent 1,000 Slack messages. I had so many one-on-ones. I was like in Jira, I was in Asana, I was in 100 spreadsheets. And it was like taking up half of each quarter for
Yeah.
us to revisit our OKRs, etc. But again, for my job was for the executive to make it seem like everything was going smoothly, and he would always have the information he needed, right, to know, yes, things are on track, they're not on track, etc. Like he got exactly that. But the reality is that most other people in the organization don't have that. Like for them to get the information to do their job, or prioritize properly. They're the ones that have to lurk in like 80 Slack channels or try to decrypt
Yeah.
Jira, which is like Jira is just like so hard because there's so much movement. So even when we're talking to a product manager, works at a very large company that has built out all this internal tooling to help them with collaboration. And I asked her, how much time do you spend in syncs and subsyncs to know where everyone else is at or keep them updated? And she's like, 80% of my time. And that does not
Mm.
include one-on-ones. So most of my strategic work I do after work. And we talked to someone that manages CS today, and he said his CS team spends at least 20 hours per person every week just going through engineering tickets and like
Oh my
figuring out
God.
what is actually going on. I was like, I think executives often don't fully understand the
Right.
scale and amount of time you spend on it, because there are people that make it seem really smooth for them, but the people that actually sit in those roles get so little time to spend time on the things that actually create value and brings them joy in their job. And I'm like, that balance
Yeah.
we just have to restore, not only to drive business outcomes, but also like have employees that are like, yeah, I'm doing something important here. Like it matters and I know why it
Yeah.
matters, right? And I think we've lost it a little bit in the
I
past
think
few years.
also the knock on to that too is, as an executive, a lot of times you may not understand the downstream implications of one of your asks. Like, you don't understand how many man hours or people hours went into you asking a 2 sentence question, you know? And I think that's, it's all interrelated. And so then all of a sudden you become the person that's keeping your teams from doing the things that they're there to do and they're there to love, and they're starting to hate their lives just because they're weeding through tickets.
Yeah. And I think the buffer people, right? Like we were talking with someone, he's a director of engineering, also at a large company. And we always ask people, what's your most dreaded Slack ping? And he was joking, my manager, which was like the
Hmm.
VP of engineering, because usually that means, well, something is on fire, something needs to be reprioritized. Then he's the one that has to like handle the aftermath, right? Of the team on, hey, we're not doing this anymore. We're now doing this. And for
Yeah.
me too, and not everyone has this, right? Like for my CTO prior, like he was like a very intimidating person. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my entire
Yeah.
life. Like I don't understand how his brain can work the way it does, but he also
Hmm.
is like very sometimes like impulsive and impatient. And there's like cultural things in this. And he doesn't understand that his title weighs a lot. Like
Yes.
CTO weighs a lot. So I had an 8-year long relationship with him. So I knew how to like decrypt what he's actually saying and rein
Yeah.
him in and, kind of push back on him. And that was like then my job, right? I was the buffer between teams, because if he comes in and it's like, no, we're doing this now, everyone's like, oh my God, we're doing this now because Valentino says this. And I was like, no, 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 like, let's hold on. But I think that's also the other thing that, yes, executives, and I think executives are aware of this too. The higher up you move, the less context you have, the harder it is for
Yes.
you to make strategic decisions, but it is your job. But then you also don't have insight into all the things your teams are already juggling. So you think, oh, one more ask, what is it going to do? And I think, especially in our recent conversations for discovery for Joyn, executive driven decision making that is uninformed has been the number one problem statement that really
Mm.
derails teams significantly. So 100% to what you just said, and something to be aware of in an executive leadership
Yeah.
position. It just weighs differently.
It really does. And I feel like, though, in an age of really solid generative AI summary capabilities, like, I feel like my hope is that we're exiting out of this land where an executive question necessitates the use of 50 spreadsheets. It's like, train it on the data. They can ask the question themselves and get the actual insights that they need, versus like this, again, this watered down, filtered kind of message that happens quite a bit, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's our hope too, in terms of what we're trying to do with Joyn, right? Root things more in actual data to keep people informed, but with that also like really empower.
Mhm.
understanding, accountability, decision making. So it's definitely like our intention, because I think right now a lot of what we're doing with it's like, again, these like cumbersome status updates people have to put together in like spreadsheets or in a written way. They primarily solve for the fact that somebody doesn't have context because they can't have their hands on everything. And I 100% understand that, right? If you're the CEO of an 800-person company, like it's impossible for you to keep tabs on everything. So this is like kind of like a means to an end to a
Yeah.
means to an end, in
Means to an
terms
end.
of right
Yeah.
getting what you need from a visibility perspective. Again, just the overhead is not well understood, but the
Yeah.
benefit now of a lot of our communication happening in tools and progress happening in tools is that there is now a way to have a system that connects all the context and information, understands people priorities, and like can give them the information they need to do their job or make decisions or reprioritize. And that's like the beauty of like, how we can now use data, and then also how we can use AI to really cater it to each individual at the organization and bridge that gap. So I'm definitely very excited about that. So yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. Hey, I want to have a brief chat with you about this show. Did you know that roughly 60% of listeners aren't actually subscribed to the show on whatever platform they're listening to it on? Now, as you know, algorithms love likes, follows, subscribes, comments, all of that kind of stuff. So if you get value out of the content, you listen regularly, and you want to help others to discover the content as well, please go ahead and follow the show, leave a comment, leave a review. Anything that you want to do there really helps us to grow organically as a show. And while you're at it, go sign up for the companion newsletter that goes out every week at digitalcustomersuccess.com. Now back to the show. It's so cool. Quick shift and right turn into that a little bit, because like, you're early stage. I think, you've got a few customers that are on board and, starting to work with the solution and whatnot. And I'm curious, I guess the context of like early stage and that evolution of customer facing motions throughout like early stage startups. Where are you guys in that journey? Like, have you brought on folks yet to really handle those kinds of things? Are you still the one, engaged with your customer every single day? And then, as a connecting point, like how are you thinking about things digitally from a customer support perspective, I suppose?
Yeah. Yeah. And we're just now at a place where we're kind of like opening up the floodgates more to have more people be able to use Join, but it's
Yeah.
definitely all founder led sales right now. And it's
Yeah.
a combination of, we're doing cold LinkedIn outreach, battling LinkedIn Sales Navigator, which why is it so bad? I'm like, I mean, I
For
understand
how expensive it is.
it's so bad. And I get it. LinkedIn has the data, so they kind of have to do
Yeah.
the bare minimum because it's the
Hmm.
only way for you to access data. But I'm like, I can't believe it. And then,
Yeah.
we work obviously a lot with operators and engineers. They live in a lot of like communities. So that's been a big thing for us to figure out, alongside things like content strategy, which I'm not gonna lie, like we have one of our investors and she is very adamant on like you have to post on LinkedIn at least
Hmm.
once a week. She ideally wants us to post twice a week. And it's just, I don't know.
It's
The
hard.
thought leadership thing, I'm just like, it's just not my energy, but we've been starting to do that as well. So there's like a few things now that we're kind of figuring out in our go to market. We're looking into some other tools as well to help us streamline things, because initially it was like a smaller scale, right? Because we needed very little customers. Now it's more like how are there ways that we can have more repeatable motions. But in terms of the people that we're already working with, Kendra is my co-founder, extremely hands-on with them because
Mm.
they're very like still early beta customers, right? So we're working with these really early advocates that are giving us feedback, and they know the product's still not 100% there. So she built really strong relationships through calls and like, also bringing other people in the organization on board. And just, yeah, so we're still at this place. I think we'll be there for a while longer because like we're really only looking to bring on like another 10 customers like in the
Yeah.
quarter. So, you know, we're not at this like crazy scale yet where it's not manageable to us. And I think for us now, having these really close relationships with the early advocates is exactly what we need to then figure out, okay, now we have the product, we understand the ROI, we have the message, we have the sales motions. Now, how do we support them at more scale, right? Right now,
Hmm.
it's all product. It's all how we're
Yeah.
creating value through the product and how we're helping them tell the story of Joyn to other teams that they're working with. So that's kind of been our biggest focus right now. Still a lot to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's a marathon, not a
it definitely
sprint.
is.
Yeah. What has your have there been any kind of unexpected things that have happened, or any kind of, challenges that you've encountered customer facing wise, where you were like, I should have done that differently, or like, like any light bulb moments?
Yeah, I think our biggest misstep, because I don't want to call it a mistake, because everything's learning
You
in the
learn
early
from
stage,
everything. Yeah.
because you literally
Yeah.
don't know anything.
Yeah.
Um, I think initially we're like, oh, let's go like very focused, like a specific use case, work really tightly with a narrow group of people. And that was like an easy way for us to get into the organization because it's like, oh, you have
Mhm.
like maybe two stakeholders, sometimes three. Problem though is if it's a very narrow use case and we're saying we're like reducing the noise across like product progress. So like the team's informed, our value creation just wasn't as extensive as we wanted it to be, right? Because the
Mm.
more data we kind of like skim through and like give context and contextualize in a personalized way, the more value we're actually creating. So what we instead realized is like, no, 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 like let's not go super narrow. Our approach really should be give us as much data as possible, and then we'll contextualize it and really right skim it down to what you actually need to know depending in the role that you're in. So now that we onboard people, it's not like just add us to this one Slack channel and this one Jira board. Now it's
Yeah.
like add us to all Jira boards, add us to all the Slack channels where product development conversations happen. And like now we're able to create a lot of like value because we have access to more data that we're contextualizing. So I think we initially went like, let's go as narrow as possible. And that didn't really make sense. We're still narrow with like the use case, but we're not narrow with the data and in terms of like what we're taking the noise out of. So I think that was
Mhm.
like a big learning for us and where we had to just shift our strategy and did that pretty rapidly because it was, unfortunately, the people we worked with, when we asked them to expand usage and the data we have
Yeah.
access to, like they were on board with it. So
Mhm.
fortunately, we were able to then scale it and create the value that is the value of Joyn. But that was a big learning for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. And yeah, I guess the beauty of it is you can pivot quickly when you're, when you're that size, and everything, I think everything you do is like a building block that informs how you do it the next time, right? And
100%. And we
those
always tell our engineers too, whatever you're building this week might not exist anymore in 2 weeks. So we really
mm,
can't be married to anything because I think something that people do wrong, not just as early stage founders, but also in product management, is that we get really married to a solution and we're like, no, this is 100% a problem. This is a solution to it. That we actually start losing sight of, well, is it though? Because honestly, you should constantly validate, is this just a narrative you're telling yourself because you've lived it, right? Like even when we're doing discovery, like we're trying to like not ask leading questions as much as possible to kind of confirm our own biases. But if you get too married to this is how it has to look like, you might miss really important signals that actually lead you to the right direction. And like how
mhm.
Joyn looked like in the beginning is so different to what it looks like
Yeah.
now. And I think it speaks to especially Kendra and her ability to really have a pulse and see through what people are saying. Because we also get a lot of people that are like super excited, but then it's like, are you actually going to pay for it though? And it's like, a no,
Mhm.
okay, whatever. So like, I think she's been really good to like read signals properly, but then also adapt really quickly and not be married to anything we're building or attached to it. Because again, it can be like completely, we built a whole dashboard And our biggest value add is that nobody has to go to the dashboard because we're pushing everything into the tools that they're already using, right? So
Yeah.
there you go. It happened.
Yeah, there's a couple things you just said that are really fascinating. I mean, I think the first one I think is a lesson for just about everything in life is like don't be afraid to like pivot hard and just throw stuff away if it doesn't work. Like build stuff, learn from it. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, pivot, throw it away, do it again, do it differently. And learn from their mistakes. I think that's huge. But then that last bit that you just talked about is really top of mind for me, which is like getting the info and the data into the place where your customer is. Like, and that I think is something that a lot of especially more mature, larger organizations overlook. They're like, oh, we're just going to send this email, or we're just going to do it in our community or whatever. And well, guess what? Half your users aren't in the community, and your executives don't really read email. So, what's your take on that? Like reaching the customer where they are. Is that something that's top of mind for you?
Yeah. And I mean, for me too, and how I'm thinking about this with our customer base, right? Like when I was a chief of staff, I had this internal knowledge. I was like, okay, this person needs Y, this person needs this person I need to remind X amount of time, right? Like I had all this like web of, oh, here's how I get to this person in the most effective way to get what I need. And the reality is that, yeah, now, with engineering teams, they live in Slack and they live in Jira. Then a lot of marketing teams live in Asana. And then you have CS that
Mm,
lives in Zendesk. And yes, we have this connection between tools, but they're still not really like effectively speaking to each other in a way that you immediately have the context you need on something, right? Like even when we talked to this person in CS, like he was saying one of the CS people, they basically give like status reports on tickets customers submitted on their like high value customers. And he showed us the status report, and it was like 20 tickets she was giving really granular updates on. But the way she had to do is like Slack people, look into
mm.
Jira, go into Zendesk. And it was just like insane. So for her to spend this amount of time to get the context she needs to send to the customer, which is a really highly important customer. And I think that was our realization for us too. It's like, I truly believe, and I know larger companies hate this, but people have their ways of working in a specific tool stack and communication that works for them. And I really don't think that there will be tools that rule them all. And like, companies have tried to move all teams to operate in Asana, or they've tried to move them to Notion, but it just doesn't work. And I think we kind of have to make peace with that. But this is again where AI gets really exciting to kind of be this horizontal layer, right? That can
Yeah.
take information from everything and then meet people in their ways of working where they already are. So I think that's been the
The
big thing
like
for us.
the aggregator of things, which is huge. One of the tools I've started using instead of Google a lot recently is Perplexity. Um, because I mean, they kind of call it an answer engine. When you search Google or whatever, you get like links to stuff, and you still have to go click into each link, and they try to summarize stuff, but it doesn't really work too well. Perplexity is like you ask it a question, it'll give you a nice Gen AI summary, and it actually it cites sources, and you can go there if you want to, but it's like a no-brainer. And I see more of that kind of stuff in BI and business, replacing like business intelligence tools, really, where you just feed it a bunch of stuff and it'll summarize it for you, and those executives can ask those questions without needing to bug somebody else for it.
Yes, 100%. And like for me too, I was actually just thinking about this recently around like, what do we even still use Google search for? And it's usually just like a restaurant or something. Cause
It's
usually
like
now I
habit.
go, yeah, because now I go to like Perplexity or Claude or Gemini,
Yeah.
but Google's obviously trying to combat it because now when you do Google search, you have the Gemini that like gives you the
Yeah.
answer on top, and you can text Gemini now. But I agree, it's like it's really interesting to see how things will be reshaped. Obviously, the data thing is, I think, the thing we talk the least about in AI. I think people have this perception of just magically feed data into AI and all your problems are solved. But there is so much data and like so much noise. So actually understanding the data and understanding what data actually matters before it even goes into an LLM is really critical, because otherwise you just get really bad outputs. And that's the thing that's a learning for us too. It's like people that come on board with us now, they kind of trust us to create that kind of value for them, right? Like get this
Hmm.
personalized summaries to like know what you need to know. But if we're like 3 times sending a summary that's like super irrelevant or just like too high level or too detailed, it's like such a fine balance of what does value actually look like and what is the information you need. And that's like for us, our job to actually understand this and think about it in terms of our data infrastructure and the knowledge graph that we're building, because it's not this magical thing, but it can be, right? Like the responsibility is really on the companies in terms of like what data and signals are they looking at. And obviously like security and like ethical approaches to AI are really critical. And we just saw this with Google, the integration
Yeah.
with Reddit that just went really not that great in terms of
There's a
the
lot of things
output.
at Google that haven't really gone too great. Like the whole, premature launch of their agent chatbot, virtual assistant kind of thing that wasn't real at all that they admitted to later. It's like, okay. And then OpenAI swoops in and they're like, yeah, you can talk to our stuff and you actually can.
I mean, right now the AI race, especially with the big players, is like pretty crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
looking at like Elon Musk's company, which he's
Mm,
my enemy. He doesn't know me, but just so you know, Elon Musk's my enemy. But then also like yeah, OpenAI, Gemini, right? They're all racing
yeah.
to be that. But to me, again, I'm the firm believer of like AI will be a commodity, will all be AI enabled companies and individuals. It'll be probably bigger than the internet was for society. But I
Yep.
agree, these like very large players that will be like very critical. There's like responsibility that they have in terms of yes, this is a race, but also we have to be thoughtful of how we're winning this race, because AI is a little scary if we're not taking into consideration these ethical
Hmm.
concerns just because of how AI works, right? It's informed by humans. So the
It is.
people building AI have to be really conscious of it, and there needs to be regulation. I'm a firm believer that AI ultimately will have more benefits than risks. But I think the race right now makes people cut corners that we shouldn't,
It's
and then we need to go
dangerous.
back and unwind. And
Yeah.
we'll see. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a little dangerous. It'll be interesting to see, and it'll also be interesting to see like how it becomes more and more of a part of our daily lives. Because I mean, right now at least, I feel like I am at least I've been really going deep on AI, and unfortunately, what that means for me is I think I'm probably quintuple paying for OpenAI right now. Like I've got it here and I've got it there and I've got it there through integrations. And then I pay OpenAI some money too to use their, premium version. And I don't know how much longer that's going to fly. Like at some point in the future, like, do we take our AI with us? Do I take our GPT with us? Is it like mobile? You plug it into different places? I don't know. It's just going to be interesting how the credit of all that works.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I mean, I know Notion AI is great, but I'm like, I'm not paying for this. Like,
No.
that's crazy. It's too expensive. And I generally think it's not because it doesn't create value, but it's because
Yeah.
I can also get that value by maybe copy pasting something into Gemini and have it do
Right.
the same thing. And I'd rather do that because I'm a founder that doesn't have a lot of money. So, I got to choose my battles. But to me, it's also like, and this is with anything, right? Like even Nextral, like we've been using AI machine learning forever. Like since
Hmm.
we started, that was like integral of like our product offering, because that's how ads work. That's how
Yeah.
personalization works. That's how it knows to
Right.
send you this kind of ad or what image to show you, right? Like that's all machine learning. But did customers care? Were they like, what machine learning model are you using? No, what they were paying for is like the ads and the return of the ads, right? And I think
That's
this
right.
is also how AI will shift. I know now every company just charges for this additional AI feature. But in the future, it's like, no, you're not creating value unless you
No.
have this AI feature, and it should be free and embedded into the tool. That's like
Yep.
my belief. I don't call Joyn an AI company. We use
Hmm.
AI as a tool to help us achieve an outcome for our customers and create
Hmm.
value. But do they care? Like they care that we're using the data in a secure way. And
Yeah.
the larger companies are like, is it closed loop? Like those things, yes, they care about. But ultimately, why they will keep working with us is because they'll get value out of it. So I'm definitely interested to see how that will shift in terms of how we as consumers of AI will pay for it or not, and like how,
Yeah.
it being more embedded as like the core value prop and how we're able to generate value, it will just be in like the core offering of the product. And like maybe, yeah, your whatever monthly pricing goes up a little bit, but am I going to pay like $40 for Notion AI? I actually don't even know how much it is. I'm like, unfortunately not,
Yeah.
but I'm also again like gotta
Well, it's,
choose what's better.
at some point it has to become a cost of doing business. You don't go buy a car without wheels on it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Look, as we start to kind of wind down the convo, I would love to understand a little bit more about what's in your content diet and what you're paying attention to keep yourself up to speed with things. And or are you or or a lot of people recently have actually just said, I just talk with people and have connections and things like that. So I'm curious as to what like that looks like for you.
Yeah, I definitely have like hard lines of content I digest just for myself, which is more true crime podcasts.
Cool.
Stuff
Awesome.
you should know is where to go. But for like a work perspective, definitely talking to people is a big thing. But I also just follow people on LinkedIn that are especially in like ethical AI or just generally in like the AI space or customer success or there's like individuals I follow. I also really like Lenny's newsletter, which is obviously more like
Mm,
product
yeah.
oriented, but I think he speaks to topics that are not just product management because product is so broad. Like he also brings
Right.
on other roles. I also really like Deb Liu. She speaks a lot to like broader leadership as well in a really tactical way. So there's like a few like newsletters I like, but I definitely follow people on like LinkedIn and as much as possible try to have conversations with people I'm like inspired
Yeah.
by and talk to. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Anybody you would want to shout out that's doing cool stuff digitally
In CS or just in general?
in general?
Okay. I want to shout out. Well, I I mean, I will shout out Lenny because I do think
Yeah,
his really unique approach, like talking about product in a way that's like not this head of product is the best organization ever. I think he speaks to like the challenges
the real,
quite a
the
bit.
T. Hmm.
Yeah, and I like that. Also, Emily Kramer from Market One. I
Mm,
actually think I honestly am often really tired of like LinkedIn influencers, but like her
yeah,
content is so good and so tactical and like combined with like being really funny. So I always read her posts and I always have takeaways from reading her posts. They also have a great newsletter, Market One, as well. So I always love the stuff that they're putting out as well.
yeah. That's
And
cool.
also Abby
Good
Miller,
list.
I'll shout her out too because
Oh,
she
Abby
talks a
Miller.
lot about AI application. And I loved her recent post on like what model she uses for what, because I think that's like a really
Cool.
interesting thing. So definitely shouting her out because I think she speaks to AI in a really tangible way, no matter what role you're in or what your level of knowledge of AI is. So, and that's where I'm going to stop.
I love that because there are a lot of people who know a lot about AI, and it's obvious they know a lot about AI, and that is a massive turnoff to a lot of people. And then there's a lot of people who know a lot about AI and make it approachable and talk about it in a digestible way, which I think is insanely valuable. I saw a statistic recently. So I did like a solo show about AI not long ago, and part of it was like, look, there's the statistic was like 25% of CS professionals use AI on a daily basis, which some would say is high. I would say it's like super low. And I think a big part of that is just like it's this mythical thing. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I kind of asked ChatGPT to write me an article once and it sucked. So like I gave up on it. Like it's this whole barrier of entry that people who know a lot about AI that can make it simple and approachable are like the valuable people right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that content too, even though I live it like every day. I'm like, it is
Yeah.
really helpful to me because like
Yeah.
even all the language around AI is very technical. It's like, well, you have a
Hmm.
prompt because it's prompt engineering. It's like, what? So I agree. And when people again with any new thing you only give it so many chances to
Yeah.
get value out of it. But then if it's just like, being informed in a way that it's very applicable and tactical to your role or what you're trying to solve, like it can be really powerful, even in like the state it is in today, which is like still a very early state of AI.
Yep.
I've used it for the most random things, but it took me a while to get there.
Yeah.
Even though I've been in AI for a decade, but
Right.
generative AI is like still pretty new,
It,
right? In
it's a
terms of like
different way of
algorithms.
working, like pulling it
Yeah.
into your day to day. It takes, at first, it takes very conscious effort to say, okay, I might ask ChatGPT to proofread this email for me. Sure. Why not?
And you notice like little things because
Yeah.
like I'm German and like in Germany, like America's very exaggerated language. Like
Hmm.
everything's like amazing, incredible, love it, hate it. It's like always the extreme of language. So it's funny sometimes when you have Gemini, you like have it, for example, read a LinkedIn post and be like,
Yeah.
any things you would change. And the output is like the super hype train, like tech bro. And I was like, no, like that's not how I talk. And then you really have to tell it,
You have to
like keep
train
the
it.
tone of the original
Hmm.
voice and like here's the audience. You just have to, the more specific you are, the better. But
Yeah.
yeah, when I would initially see this, I was like, this is dumb. And it was
Uh-huh.
like, I'm better at writing content. And obviously you are, right? It's only like a tool that helps you,
Yeah.
but you really have to tell it pretty precisely what you want it to do so it doesn't turn you into a high tech bro from Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
which is not my energy. I
No,
hope anyway.
no, it isn't at all. And that's one of the things that, you and I have in common also. We've talked about this briefly. Like I was born in Austria, but I have an American mom, which is why I sound so American. But like, I still have problems with like phrasing of stuff. And my wife will look at me sideways sometimes after I said something. She's like, I don't think you meant that, what you said. And it still happens like all the time. And actually, I've started really using generative AI that way to like check myself a little bit on how I want to say things to make sure that they're clear and conveyed correctly, because I mix stuff up all the time.
Yeah, this is again the things where it's good for, especially if you specifically tell it what to do and that it shouldn't just make stuff up. Even though it's been better now, because
Yeah,
the early days it was like making a lot of stuff up. Even that to me is like again, it's hallucinating. I'm like, this
it
is not
is.
language we should use with people that aren't in AI. It's just like it's making stuff up. It's like inferring something from what you've said and tags it on. And I always had to tell an AI, please do not
Don't
infer
make stuff up.
anything,
Yeah,
just stick to it.
it
So
really does. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
gotten better, but it still happens. So yeah,
yeah,
it's like specificity as
yeah.
much as possible until it like learns more. This is again where Notion AI is kind of nice because it obviously has like enough context to understand tone of voice. So
Right.
usually if Notion AI would draft something, it might be more quickly spot on, while with Gemini I have to do more specific like prompting, or Claude I
Hmm.
have to do more specific prompting. So
Yeah.
pros and cons to everything.
Pros
Still
and
not gonna pay
cons.
for
Nope.
it.
Well, look, I've super enjoyed this convo. Where can people find you, reach out to you, engage with you?
I'm definitely on just like LinkedIn.
Yep.
I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn. So yeah, I think that's the best way to reach me. I don't have any other social media, so LinkedIn is the
Good for
only
you.
place to find me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thank you again for joining. It's been enlightening and super fun, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. This was very fun.
Of course. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Digital CX Podcast. If you like what we're doing, consider leaving us a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment down below. It really helps us to grow and provide value to a broader audience. You can view the Digital Customer Success Definition Word Map and get more information about the show and some of the other things that we're doing at digitalcustomersuccess.com. This episode was edited by Lifetime Value Media, a media production company company founded by our good mutual friend Dylan Young. Lifetime Value aims to serve the content, video, audio production needs of the CS and post-sale community. They're offering services at a steep discount for a limited time, so navigate to lifetimevaluemedia.com, go have a chat with Dylan, and make sure you mention the Digital CX Podcast sent you. I'm Alex Turkovich. Thanks so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.